Hi there. Welcome back to my series going over every single piece of music in 2024's future classic Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Last episode, we covered the first dozen or so tracks from the Junon region, but we are still just scratching the surface of Chapter 4, so let's get into it. Now that we've found the latest piece of the proto-relic, befriended a new chocobo, and captured the heart of Ranch King Gabe, it's time to rest our weary limbs at the nearest inn. But before we do that, I think I missed something back near the Wainwright's hut, up on the mountain, like a Moogle coin or something. I don't know, it just feels like something's missing. So before we head to Under Junon, let's just retrace our steps for a second. As we reach the cliff, I realize what I missed. It wasn't a Moogle coin. It was a whole damn musical reference. Yes, I was humbled in the comments of my last video, where several commenters pointed out that the Condor Passage is actually a cleverly disguised arrangement of the Fort Condor theme. The arranger did an incredible job transforming it. All of the original's militaristic marching might has been completely stripped away, disarmed if you will. The example given in the comments was this section here. In hindsight, this seems so obvious, but like the Condor itself, it completely flew over my head. Let me play you a few more similarities I found, though these are certainly a bit looser interpretations of the theme. You're welcome to make your own conclusions on these ones. Wow, what a novel arrangement. I mentioned in the last episode that looking out at the battered Junon region with the setting sun on the horizon is one of my absolute favorite moments in all of Rebirth. The discovery that there are so many more layers to the music that plays during the scene really elevates the whole thing that much more. Many thanks to everyone who pointed this one out to me. Anyhow, let's mosey on. Following the lovingly painted signs and rocky tunnels northward leads us to Under Junon. And even though we can't stroll right in, the town mayor Rhonda has a few questions for us first, we can still hear its new theme welcoming us. Just like with Midgar's Upper Plate and the slums, there is a massive economic, architectural, and thematic divide between Upper Junon and Under Junon. This dichotomy is true of the sounds of the areas too. It shouldn't be too surprising to learn that the music down here, well, it doesn't really sound like the music up there. We'll contrast the two areas once we reach Upper Junon a few episodes from now, but we're in Under Junon for the rest of this episode, so let's focus on that. In 1997's Final Fantasy VII, maybe you've heard of it, Under Junon didn't have its own theme. It played On Our Way, the town theme typically associated with calm, but not exclusively so. It's a cozy piece we first covered back in Part 6, and while Calm and Under Junon share a lot of anxiety about Shinra's encroaching might, from most other standpoints, the two towns are pretty different. So just like with the Junon region itself, the Rebirth developers once again make the right call by giving Under Junon its own unique theme. And what a lovely theme it is. Thematically, the instrumentation choice gets a 10 from me. We have a kalimba, an acoustic guitar, and a variety of earthy percussive instruments. It's all extremely tactile and handmade, which evokes the carpentry, creativity, and ad hocness of the town's citizens and architecture. Along with the steel strings of the guitar and the metal teens of the kalimba, there's also a steel pan drum that briefly comes in, further driving home the town's metalworking. The ambiguously rhythmic percussive hits right before the loop subconsciously doubles as Foley for the town's ambient soundtrack, sounding like carpenters hammering away on their crafts. The music sounds like what the town looks like. The town looks like what the music sounds like. It's perfect. The lead is a beautiful sounding, deep, earthy woodwind. In the mix, it's up close and personal and very singular. A little bit further away, you can hear what I think is a viola. Sounds a touch low for a violin, but what do I know? As its main accompaniment, finishing some of the flute sentences. Nakamura has panned the viola off-center and it's lower in the mix than you might expect, giving the listener a certain distance from the instrument. It's mixed like it's in the alcove of a bar or something, which gives the whole mix a much more down-to-earth, intimate feel compared to the larger orchestrations we've heard so far. And speaking of larger orchestrations, in the last episode, I spent maybe too much time lamenting what I felt was a failing in Nakamura's main Junon region theme for capturing the region's swashbuckling and militaristic fetish, but failing to evoke the deep sadness and tragedy of the region. I also posited that this omission might be deliberate, and here, with the Under Junon theme, I think that becomes clearer. I see these two pieces as beautifully complementary. The Junon region piece is loud, full of brass, big strings, and big percussion. It's a bit cold and impersonal, an ideal more than a reality. The Under Junon theme, however, with its warm, organic tones, messy, quote-unquote imperfect instrumentation and mix, is, on the contrary, entirely human-sounding. As you activate the area's Remnawave towers, essentially a symbol of you helping restore the region, the Junon region gets a lovely mandolin layer, a reminder of the humanity within the region, perhaps. And literally, as I wrote this, I got a comment on the last video stating that the pre-Remnawave version of the track is actually just called the Junon region. It's only once you activate enough Remnawave towers and the mandolin comes in that the touch of humanity returns and the track gets its very appropriate subtitle, Remnants of the Republic. All to say, I think treating these two polar opposite tracks as complementary diptychs elevates them both. They also blend well together. In a hypothetical post-Shinra world where Junon can finally start to rebuild on their own terms, it would be lovely to see these two themes merge together. Further into the town, you can hear the sound of a band playing outside the Lone Tavern. This is Chapter 4's first diegetic track, which means I had to turn down the music slider and turn up the sound effects to capture this one. Please don't mind the sound of the people protesting Shinra just outside the tavern. On screen, we've got a banjo player, a chunky acoustic bass guitar, an accordion, and a fiddle, but I'm hearing a strumming regular acoustic guitar as well. Sounds like a 5-piece, not a 4-piece. Feels like they could have just copy-pasted the diegetic double bass dude from Calm in there as well, but maybe 4 is a party and 5's a crowd. On the flip side, that is a beautiful acoustic bass guitar though. Wow, it's just huge. Also, if you zoom into that headstock, yep, just what I thought. Even out here, Shinra's got a monopoly on the arts. Might want to get a Sharpie out before the crowd of protesters spots that logo. Oh, and the music? What about it? It's fine. I don't know. I hope the tavern's paying them well because I'm not seeing an open instrument case asking for tips. I'm assuming this track was made by the same person who did the diegetic Dutchy dance number from Chapter 2, which similarly didn't evoke any FF7 leitmotifs, but was very lively and cleanly produced. Honestly, I kinda wonder if these 2 tracks might be outsourced or like licensed from a pre-existing music library. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but the lack of any discernible leitmotifs, the surprisingly high quality production value, the fact that they are very accurate and safe examples of the respective genres they are trying to emulate, it all feels not very unique to Rebirth. Especially if you compare these with the incredible diegetic jukebox tracks from Remake. Those were also excuses for fun, accurately executed forays into musical genres not usually covered in Final Fantasy, but in those cases they had so much more character because they were still arrangements of classic tracks that answered deep questions like, what if The Oppressed was jazz fusion? What if Chocobo was hip-hop? What if Fort Condor was a Peruvian oh no, hang on. That was Rebirth. That one's not a jukebox track, but it has the creativity of one, which is why this diegetic track and the one in Calm are a little bit of a disappointment to me. It's like they wanted to keep that excessively eclectic mix of diegetic musical styles that adds so much variety and texture to the world of Remake and Rebirth, but they ran out of time or money to produce particularly memorable ones themselves. That's why I feel like they were done by someone maybe less directly connected to the Remake series project, like a track taken from a high-quality music library. At least that's my theory. I apologize in advance if I'm completely off the mark, and I've just thrown one of Rebirth's arrangers under the bus. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving. Luckily, the inn is just across the street, so it's time to hit the sack. Our party hasn't slept since leaving Calm, so they must be dead tired. Has our party not merited a good night's rest? Nay, says a young girl's voice calling for help outside. Sleep must wait, as decidedly unsleepy music ramps up. This track might be familiar to folks who played Final Fantasy VII Remake's Intermission DLC, i.e. the Yuffie DLC, since that's where it originally shows up. This is a Shima original, and I dig the unlikely pairing of propelling synths and woodblocks, which remind me a little bit of Hurry from the original game, which also paired its urgent synths with what sounded a bit like woodblocks. Not a deliberate reference, I don't think, but anything that reminds me of a top 5 Final Fantasy VII track like Hurry is a good thing to me. Reaching the shore, our intermission track quickly fades out and is replaced with a new bombastic cutscene track. I don't hear any FF7 leitmotifs in this piece. A reference to Yuffie or even Under Junon would have been cool, but the scene is so action-packed I can see why they'd want to just keep things moving. While a lot of this piece has the percussive energy of a Shima track, the fact that it's been arranged with virtual instruments leads me to believe this might actually be a Ryo Furukawa arrangement. He usually splits the difference between Yoshitaka Suzuki's less realistic sounding virtual instruments and Shima's live orchestration, so could be him. although it could still be a Shima arrangement. There's no reason he wouldn't employ virtual instruments if he had to as well. Another clue that it could be Shima is that the track seamlessly transitions into the next track, which is a confirmed Shima track. It doesn't confirm anything, but as we discussed in the last episode, seamless track transitions are logistically much likelier and easier to be implemented when dealing with two tracks by the same arranger. Anyhow, midway through the cutscene, as the events start setting up the inevitable boss fight, the piece segues into this episode's second track from the remake Yuffie DLC. This is a fantastic boss theme primarily based around the Wutai motif. If that seems random, remember that this is Rebirth's introduction to Wutai's greatest ninja, Yuffie. And to make the connection even clearer, it then starts weaving in parts of Yuffie's own theme. I don't think it's particularly controversial to say that Yuffie's DLC might just have the greatest, most generous and varied soundtrack to any piece of DLC ever. Objection! Or at least one of. It is an outrageous embarrassment of riches, but one of the coolest parts about it, I mean aside from the album's worth of pop songs written around the elusive Happy Turtle Bar, is the unreal amount of mileage Shima gets out of the Wutai theme. The Gigantipede boss track is a good example of this, but there's more. For Sonon's theme, Shima nibbles off a small piece of a Wutai passage and fleshes it out into a stern, determined melody evocative of Sonon's burning conviction. Other times, Shima takes the exact same original melody fragment and develops it into wistful heartbreak. I could keep going, but this is all to say, wow, is the intermission soundtrack phenomenal. So I'm glad to see so much of it showing up in Rebirth, such as the Gigantipede track during this fight against Bottomswell. However, unlike the first two boss tracks of Rebirth, which started with remake tracks before ascending into completely original Rebirth bangers, this fight bucks that trend. Once you reach the cutscene leading into the second phase of the battle, the transition music is identical to the one in the original Gigantipede boss fight. Unlike the Materia Guardian and Midgarstormer, this battle plays it pretty straight, musically speaking. For the rest of the fight, it simply loops this second phase of the track. Which is a touch unfortunate since we miss out on the increasingly hyper-energetic music phases from the original. Yeah, that might be my favorite part in the whole track. Oh well. But on the flip side, once you land the killing blow on Bottomswell, the track ends the bar, then seamlessly passes the baton to a new Rebirth exclusive outro. I'm kinda assuming this outro was arranged by the same person who arranged the intro of this track, the part before intermissions the Gigantopede started. Though this time I feel more convinced that it's Furukawa and not Shima who arranged it. The thumping rhythmic percussion, brass and strings that accompanies the twirling dolphin is classic Furukawa. That was a fun sentence to read. That's gotta be Furukawa, right? And if it is Furukawa, that means we've immediately found an example of a seamless track transition between two arrangers. Something I said might be rare. Or maybe not so rare after all, huh? Though, to be fair, this is Furukawa creating new tracks around a pre-existing remake-era Shima track. Furukawa could have simply been assigned this older Shima track to work around, which to me isn't quite the same as an active, collaborative handoff between two Rebirth arrangers. That, or maybe I'm just trying to save face by pushing the goalpost further away. Anyhow, for my spreadsheet, I'm going to treat these three tracks, the new intro of Yuffie being attacked by Bottom as well, the Gigantopede boss fight, and the new dolphin-filled outro, as one track. And I'm going to credit this one as arranged by Shima and Furukawa. I don't feel great about that clumping. I think you could just as easily keep these three tracks separate, but for simplicity's sake, I'll leave it as one for now. As Cloud emerges from the water and we glimpse his characteristically frost-tipped hair uncharacteristically flattened by the effects of water and gravity, a short piece begins to play. The big triumphant reference to the Wutai theme works as a slightly delayed concluding remark to the boss fight. You could almost call it a continuation of the last piece, were it not for the 3 seconds of silence between the two. The brass once again sounds like Ryo Furukawa. Afterward, the clicking percussion and relaxed, subdued string layers help ease the come down from the dramatic tempo of the boss battle. Completely unrelated, but it immediately made me think of the track Impending Doom from the 13 Sentinels soundtrack. No? I was just looking for any excuse to mention the amazing 13 Sentinels soundtrack, one of the best from the last generation of consoles? Okay, you got me. Anyhow, the track loops until you reach the shore, at which point it fades out with the start of the cutscene. There's no music for a bit, perhaps to help convey the urgency and gravity of the situation. Then, as Cloud is roped into the action, our next piece starts up. With Yuffie comes a lot more whimsy and playfulness to the soundtrack. While Yuffie's leitmotif was briefly teased in the Gigantopede boss fight, we now get a slightly longer introduction to it. But her somewhat sterner persona gets dispelled once she is able to put a name to the faces before her. It's Avalanche. As the brief flashback changes the tone of the scene, so too does the accompanying music. Most dominant is a reverby, reversed-sounding pad layer, with a subdued, pulsing bass line moving us along. But if you really turn up the volume, you can hear a faint piano melody line that I'm having a tough time placing. What is that? I tried getting to the bottom of it by looking at a few tracks. The original scene from the intermission DLC that this flashback is taken from is accompanied by the piece A Hero Lost, a track we discussed back in episode 5. That track features parts of Tifa's theme and Yuffie's theme. I didn't find the melody in either of those. I looked at Barrett's theme as well, since he's part of the focus of Yuffie's gaze here, but I didn't find any strong connections there either. I checked both Nakamura and Hamauzu's versions of the Avalanche theme, since that's who Yuffie's looking for, but no dice. The only place I could find where it kinda worked was in that mysterious Chapter 3 Light at the End of the Tunnel melody. It's the first 4 notes of the 7-note melody. So it's far from perfect, but damn, I don't know, maybe? In the Chapter 3 scene, it's about Barrett and Red joining up with the party, while this time it's about Yuffie meeting up with the party. So could this be some sort of very subtle lowercase r reunion theme? Yes? No? What about you? Is this 4-note passage an obvious reference to something that flew over my head, Condor style? Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas. I will say the piano line is mixed extremely low in the mix. It's deliberately very quiet, possibly to hide this obscure motif, or perhaps more likely to de-emphasize a few notes that aren't supposed to point to anything in particular, beyond just adding a bit of texture to this scene. I think it's likely the latter, but who knows? Anyhow, as Yuffie realizes who she's talking to, we get a longer introduction to her theme. But since she's no longer on the defensive, the underlying chord progression is way more relaxed and jazzy. It's a chord progression you'd usually hear in some 70s R&B or nearly any era of J-pop music. It sounds fantastic. Definitely my favorite version of her theme so far. I would love to see this arrangement fleshed out by one of the many awesome video game jazz cover bands. The swagger of the cooler chord progression could point to Nakamura being the arranger, but the instrumentation sounds a lot more like Shima to me. Either way, this one's definitely making my top plus tracks list. Moving on. If we hadn't earned our rest before, we sure as heck have now. Checking in at the inn leads us to a familiar arrangement of On Our Way. We were due for a version of On Our Way in Under Junon, since that's the track that plays here in the original game. Limiting it to just the inn, in exchange for the new Under Junon theme we discussed at the top of the episode, was the right call. This is the version that plays in Remake after Cloud and Tifa liberate Johnny from some Shinra grunts. There's some thematic parallel too, with the track being used in Remake and Rebirth during scenes showing the major tension in Tifa and Cloud's relationship, both their pasts, presents, and futures. So good choice. And with that, the day finally comes to a close. But the party's got an equally arduous tomorrow ahead of them, so they're going to need all the rest they can get. Likewise, that's where I'll call it for today. If you too would like to influence how these episodes take shape, have a look at my Patreon. It's a good place to be if you want to be more in the know as to how the series and the channel is shaping up. I've already discussed what will likely be the next several non-Rebirth videos over there, which I plan to more formally announce here once those plans are a bit more solidified. If you like those sorts of teases, as well as post-episode write-ups and downloadable versions of my finished and work-in-progress spreadsheets, check out my Patreon. Okay, that's it for the shill. Let's let our pals sleep. See you in the morning. Bye.